treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.
Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's our pleasure to have with us tonight Judge Tom Engel from New York. Thank you for being with us again, Tom.
Well, Sam, it's a pleasure to be back in Georgia on such a fine day in the spring, and reminds me of my boyhood when I used to come down here to Georgia, visit my grandparents in Tifton, and my aunt and uncle.
Well, good, Tom. Did you get a chance to shoot squirrels or jump in the water when you were younger?
We did a lot of fishing, mostly.
Oh, that's good. That's a good story.
Mostly for catfish. Yeah.
Well, I hope that was a good experience in your life preparation. That's a great adventure, I know.
Sure was.
Well, we've talked a little bit earlier about some of the problems that confront our country, national prosperity issues, and I think we talked some about government regulation, the tort system. But there's some other defects the country has that we might just address, or at least defects might be the wrong turn of phrase, but things that might be improved. For instance, the education system. Do you have any thoughts about that? I mean, you're from your viewpoint on the bench, and just seeing how things in your observations. What are we doing right or wrong in the country, say, compared with the European experience? I know you've had experience in Germany. I know you know something about that.
I was listening to a program yesterday on the radio comparing Finland to the United States and linking education and poverty. And I was getting a little impatient about it because Finland is, such a small country. I don't suppose it's as big as most of our states. And it, of course, has a remarkably homogeneous group of people. But to give them their due, I think they have highly skilled and dedicated professionals who are teaching. That was my impression. And in New York, we're having a battle royal now over our schools in New York City because the new mayor, who was elected, I would like to just inform your viewers, with only 17% of the vote, is in thrall and in chains, if you will, to the New York State Federation of Teachers. The teachers union backed the Mayor de Blasio, and he has let it be known that he is going to cut back on charter schools. And the charter schools have been a blessing ever since they were brought to our state by my dear friend and law school classmate George Pataki, who was governor in the 1990s. And charter schools have turned around education for many of the most impoverished kids in New York, largely Hispanic and African American kids, and where, for example, in schools, in the public schools in New York City, you have rates of proficiency in mathematics as low as 30%. Whereas in the charter schools at the same grades, those proficiencies are over 80%. There really is no longer, it seems to me, any question that the charter schools are effective in improving the education of young people, and particularly vulnerable young people. But the impact of the teachers union and their financial support to a candidate like Mayor de Blasio has made him a captive of a special interest, an interest that seems to be more motivated by job security than it is in promoting the education and well-being of our young people.
Well, those are rather serious charges. Do you think politicians are influenced by politics, or rarely, all the time, or sometimes? I mean, obviously, he's a politician. That sounds like not such a good situation. Do you think there's any merit at all? I mean, presumably, I'm trying to remember, traditionally, I think New York public schools in New York City it was a large seaport. Immigrants came from all over the world, and they would, I think there's, what's the Americanization? I'm trying to think, Hyman Kaplan, there's sort of a famous story about that.
Right,
Going
education of Hyman Kaplan.
That's correct. So the idea is the public schools there were a tremendous gateway to American life, and they were, at least in earlier days, they were a very vigorous, important institution. And it seems to be that's stopped happening. Why mightn't it have stopped? What do you think has transpired there?
I don't know the answer to that. To be candid, I do think that the growth of public service unions has been a lamentable exercise in power politics in this country ever since it was first encouraged. I'm afraid to say by President Kennedy when he permitted the federal employees to unionize in just after, 1961, something like that. And now, all of these public employees are unionized, and they, of course, don't have employers to push back on them with legitimate corporate interests and boards of directors and shareholders and so forth. They have the public, and the public is represented only by the people that they elect, and the people they elect are dependent on campaign contributions to get elected. Now, you've seen in some states, particularly Wisconsin comes to mind, where the pushback against these government unions has been significant, and now, as a result of Governor Walker's really very strong stand in Wisconsin against these state unions, you find that they are plummeting in their numbers because it is no longer permitted for them to have, I think it's called check-off,
Yes.
Where their union dues are automatically deducted from their paycheck and go straight into the coffers of the union, whence they are then distributed
Yes, yes.
to the politicians whom they favor.
Right.
So the problem is one of a constituency, it seems to me, and these public unions have a captive constituency in their politicians as opposed to a legitimate counterbalance in the form of corporate ownership, boards of directors, shareholders, and the like.
Yes. Well, you could make the converse argument and say, well, okay, we have the power of capital. People are especially interested in giving money to politicians. If you're a person of modest means, you couldn't do that. So the unions may give the system a little balance. But I admit there are cases where this balance is getting out of kilter, particularly if the argument is it's having a negative impact on public schools. And that's a pretty good argument you've presented. Is there evidence, what exactly is so good about a charter school? Why do they do so much better than the public schools? I mean, it must be something more than mere presence of unions. Is it their culture or their way they treat their students?
I think by and large, the single biggest element that is crucial to the success of charter schools is the element of choice. And we went into that a little bit. But essentially what it is, as I understand it, is that parents have the opportunity to take their children to a school that they like and that the child likes, and where the child is going to have a chance. And they are staffed independently, not through unions, but through creative hiring of people, even people with perhaps less experience than the teachers who are teaching in the public schools. And so there's this element of choice and an element, therefore, of the parents getting involved and getting behind the experience that their children are having in schools. And you have, instead of people whose business it is to make sure that they have sufficient vacation time and retirement pay, you have young people mostly who are committed to teaching the youngest children and bringing them along. Just last week we had 15 10-year-old kids that were in from the Harlem Village Academy in our law office, and they were all very well behaved. They were all very interested in what was going on, and they asked a few of us, including me, to have a few minutes to speak to them. I treated it as an opportunity to be a professor, and so I ended up asking a lot of questions and getting a lot of activity. But you could see from the curiosity and enthusiasm these young people showed that they were very involved, and the teachers who brought them there, one of them was a young man who was on his way to law school, but they couldn't have taken their work more seriously, and the kids showed a tremendous understanding and appreciation of that.
Yes. Well, now, Tom, just to continue on the education subject, there are tremendous public schools in New York City. I mean, the Bronx High School, School of Science, they're high school science, and they're very Olympian schools there. I mean, so not every public school in New York City is on the ropes. Is that a fair statement?
No,
I mean, there are some very Olympian public schools.
Yeah, those schools, Stuyvesant High School, Bronx Science, and probably half a dozen others are high schools.
Right. Yes.
And the kids who go there are get in there by competing on entrance examinations, and they do very well. At a place like Stuyvesant these days, I understand that the high school student populations is over 60% Asian, for example, and then maybe another 30+% Caucasian, and therefore very few spots for Hispanic and African American youngsters. And the reason for that seems to me is that by the time these kids, the poorer students among those kids, get to high school, the game is already over. The game is over. They don't know enough. They're the ones who haven't passed their math proficiency that I was talking about before. And therefore, they're not in a position to compete at a school like Stuyvesant or Bronx Science. So the real key, it seems to me, is to get at the most vulnerable, the kids with the least opportunities, kids who probably have sometimes challenging home lives, and try to do something for them, and do it at the get-go. I don't think that it's necessary to have Head Start or pre-K or anything else. Those seem to me to be sort of glorified babysitting services. Nothing wrong with them. But I don't think that that's where learning comes in. Learning comes in pretty much where you'd think it would. Where these kids are 5 and 6 years old and they're beginning
Yes.
learn how to read, just like a couple of my grandchildren.
Yes. Yes.
And so that's when you have to get at them.
Well, now, Tom, what about the German model and maybe the European model in general, where the young people sort of go on different tracks, and some go into the gymnasium where they get their, let's see, I'm going to mispronounce this, their Arbeit or whatever. At the end of they get almost a degree, and they go from the gymnasium and they wind up in the university there. And then there's another tract of people that go into a splendid apprentice program. So there's sort of a job waiting for them, a high-paid job in the German system. I mean, do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, you're talking about the Fachschule, which is where they, instead of going to
the trade school,
to the gymnasium, they go to the Fachschule, and those that's an historic situation that is born, I think, of this sense that Germany has had really since Bismarck of Gemeinschaft, of community.
Yes.
And the idea is that everybody's going to need a plumber,
yes.
and they're going to need a tailor, and they're going to need a roofer,
yes.
and they're going to need to go to a hotel,
right.
and they're
yes.
going to need bakers,
yes. yes.
and so forth, and it recognizes that, and people do get slotted off into situations like that, and oftentimes generation after generation of people become the same accountants or
yes,
bookkeepers
yes,
or whatever that their fathers and now mothers
yes,
were.
Yes.
But I think that situation probably doesn't work as well in
yes.
the United States as it does in Germany because of a different history.
Yes.
I think our history is full of promises to people that they can be anything they want.
Yes.
There's a
yes.
pot of gold at the end of the rainbow,
yes.
and it's for anybody who wants to go out there and get it. That promise enlivens American society
yes.
and motivates young people in a very creative and useful way. If only the government would get out of the way once they try
yes,
to make
yes,
their pot
yes,
of money.
Yes.
But it's a different history and a different culture from much of Europe, and I would say that other countries in Europe more resemble Germany than they do certainly the United States.
So you're sort of a proponent of American exceptionalism, is that right? So you believe the country is a little different. I tried to get you to swing at that pitch, but your answer was it's a different kind of country, and we have a different situation, and we don't want to close any doors to anyone, and that makes the country different.
Well, I think another way to put that, if I may, Sam, would be to say that the American dream is premised on the idea that you will stand on the shoulders of your father, and that you will do better than your father. Even those of us who perhaps didn't do as well
yes.
as their father,
yes, yes, right.
I know many of them, starting with myself, perhaps, who didn't. Nevertheless, I was a lawyer, and my father sort of wanted to be a lawyer, but never
yes.
got there.
Right. Yes.
So, but that's provincial. What I'm saying is that's the dream. That's
yes.
the premise. And I think in more stratified traditional societies, like Europe, for example, they are perfectly happy to be doing what their father did.
Yes.
And they're proud of it, and there's no
yes.
reason why they shouldn't
yes.
be.
Yes. Well, in trying to preserve and promote national prosperity, maybe one of the things to do is to recognize the American exceptionalism. And some of the things we can do pretty well, maybe we should emphasize those, and some that our system isn't going to do as well as other countries, okay. But the things that we can do very well, we should excel in. And entrepreneurship, open access to different cultural pathways. I think we do very well with that. A common language, pretty much of a common culture. I mean, those are really powerful incentives to make the country work.
Yeah. I have an example.
Yes, yes.
If we still have time.
You do. Speak, yes.
About 3 or 4 years ago, I was running for Congress. It was 2011. And I went to a fracking site in northern Pennsylvania, and I had some friends at an energy company that made this site available
Yes.
to me so that I could go out and take a look and get a tour.
Sure.
And I had to be there at 8:30 in the morning or something, so I had to find someplace nearby where I could stay. And so I found a motel, but I couldn't find a motel room any closer than 50 miles away.
Wow.
So I had to drive, and the reason for that was that in going through the parking lot at the motel where I did stay, I saw license plates from darn near every state of the
Yes,
state of the
yes,
union,
yes.
and these were pickup trucks. The guys
Right,
had been
yes.
had driven from
Right, yes.
Michigan and Colorado and Wyoming and
Right.
Louisiana and Texas, all coming up to work
Yes.
on this exciting project
Yes, yes.
of getting natural gas out of the ground. And that is a great example of what Americans can do so well. None of the gas exploration that is going on today that is causing such excitement and such wealth would have happened if it weren't for the motivation of certain American types,
Yes.
call them oddballs, call
Yes.
them entrepreneurs, call them single-minded,
Yes.
guys mostly down in the oil patch,
Yes.
Texas and Oklahoma. Some of them were born in trailers, and,
Yes, yes.
and some who have college degrees, and
Yes.
and they were motivated by this dream of somehow getting this gas
Yes,
out
yes,
of the shale
yes.
rock, and doing so efficiently, safely,
Yes.
and abundantly. And they were able to do that, and it took years.
Yes.
And one of the reasons they wanted to do that was they wanted to get rich.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yes.
And they did, and they
Yes.
succeeded. And now that dream is probably a reality that's going to go back and help the people
Yes,
in Europe
yes.
who can't get their governments out of the way
Yes.
to even try to explore
Yes,
for this
yes,
kind of thing.
Yes. Do you think one of the advantages we have actually in the United States, it's a pretty egalitarian place in a lot of ways. We have there's the if you want to say there's a class system, it's extremely porous. To an understatement, it's a real cycle of people going up and down. Everyone has their chance, and you know who your father was is sort of an incidental issue compared with who you are. At least we'd like to think that's the situation, and it depends on, I guess, access to an education and also the ability to accumulate some shekels to be able to do that. And if the system prevents that, doesn't that in sort of an unintended way enforce these rigidities of the class system? So if you can't ever make it because the government has put all these barriers in front of you, it's going to solidify the situation that occurs. The government has a very expropriative tax system. That just means people that have some few shekels stashed in the backyard sort of stay in their position, but no one could accumulate any particular bit of shekels. And if the education system is kind of the European model, where we have kind of a sort of, you're in a tract and you pass your test or you don't, then you're sort of in a particular role in life. The American system is a lot more fluid and open, and everybody has a chance, and anything that impinges on that has a real negative impact on our culture and the national possibilities. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, exactly, and if our society permits people to rise, to some extent it also permits people to fall.
Yes.
I think it was Andrew Carnegie who said 3 generations from shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves.
Yes.
And so it is very much a society that is based on kind of a roll up your sleeves, can-do attitude.
Yes.
And there are always going to be casualties of that.
Yes.
And so that's part of the price that we pay for the kind of society that history has almost commanded
Yes.
us to become. Based, I suppose, on the pioneering ethic of,
Yes.
of just needing to get on with it. And I don't think that we can ever be as equal or as homogeneous as a country like Finland, which we mentioned
Yes.
earlier. But our aspirations just don't permit that. We're not that sort of country. Our history is different.
Yes.
And it's nothing that we do very well. If we tried, for example, to have a rigid system of secondary schools to train people to be beauticians and accountants and so forth,
Yes.
it wouldn't work because we're not good at that. Germany,
Yes.
say,
Yes,
is
yes,
good at
yes,
that. So we
yes.
can only do what we're good at
Yes.
and what history has prepared for us to be good at.
Yes.
And it seems to me that that's the key where America has to take advantage of its advantages.
Yes.
And somebody who has sort of quasi-socialist ambitions like our president is causing a country to do things that it's not good at.
Yes.
It's not really good at being prosperous under the yoke of regulations. And the tax regime and the regulations that are being imposed limit choice and freedom, which is what this country
Yes.
is all about.
Yes.
I mean, the scandal of corporate taxation now is ridiculous. We have the highest corporate taxation in the world. And as a result, companies, particularly since 2008, have been keeping vast treasures
Yes,
of
yes,
money
yes.
in foreign countries.
Yes.
And not bringing it here and putting it to work for the American consumer and for the American worker. And the reason is it's punitive for them to do so, and they're hoping to get a change in the tax structure. I don't know when a situation will come about, but it seems to me that we'll need new leadership in order to bring that around.
Well, we'll just have to see what the voters say. I mean, obviously, all kinds of things can take place. Maybe politicians learn, or they redirect their energies. We'll just have to await developments. But I think it is a conundrum in a way to try and balance the desire for the maximum gross prosperity of the country with ideas about inequality and some people benefiting excessively than others, this 1% idea. So the government creating a safety network, and how that's done. So the devil is in the detail, is it not? I think it's true enough, the system is a cyclical one. You're going up and you're going down depending on your luck of the draw and your own energy. But people, I would say, want a system in place where no one is starving and they're not cold at night. And some system needs to be put in place in those regards, but how that balances out is a complicated story, isn't it? Just how you do that. Another issue that I think is important is the idea of charity. So if the government becomes too expansive in its desires to put a safety network in, it can obviate the need for charity, which is one of the great connections that people have. So, all right, Tom, you've got 45 seconds for a final comment here.
Well, I think your mentioning of charity and the notion of volunteering is at the heart of the American story. And as government purports to take control or take responsibility for the safety net, these other voluntary and social groups that came together, like the churches and the fraternal organizations and other community organizations that the United States is famous for, begin to take a second seat. And that is, again, something that I don't think we're good at. I don't think we're good at being bureaucrats. We are good at organizing locally and in communities to help one another. And I'd hate to see the government become so omnipresent and powerful that we no longer are able to do that.
Okay, well, Tom, on that note, thank you for coming. We've enjoyed our conversation.
Always a pleasure.
We'll have to have you back again. Thank you.
I look forward to that.
Thank you.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute.